Okay, don't swear, I'm just recording. Okay. Pain. Pain management. So Tony sent me an article which was from a book in relation to pain management from cyclists, endurance cyclists, that sort of thing. And some of it rang true with me, and some of it was quite what I would consider to be fairly old thinking. I thought because nobody really talks about pain. Well, I do, but not many people really talk about pain. So if I said to you two quotes, I might have mentioned these before. One is Bruce Lee, Hollywood actor. Pain is only weakness leaving the body. Okay, good Hollywood quote. And the other one from the old days, no pain, no gain. So I'm interested in your thoughts about what role pain has in training and racing. The floor is yours.
Are you talking about injury pain, or are you talking about DOMS pain, or is this up to however we want to interpret it?
Okay, brilliant. Let's narrow it down a little bit. And all three groups have done that, and thank you for that. I'm not talking about going out and deliberately causing yourself pain or grief or breaking your leg or that sort of thing. I'm talking about the pain that is involved with self-inflicted pain, not accidental pain, that's involved in training, preparation for competition, training for performance and performance, that sort of thing. If you get accidentally injured, if you go too much, I'm not talking about if you sort of train too much and you normally lift 50 kilos and then you suddenly lift 100 kilos and you break completely. I'm not talking about that. The stuff that comes along during training and performance. DOMS would be involved in that, yes, but the sort of pain you're prepared to inflict on yourself. So that's really what I'm talking about. Okay.
I usually distinguish between good pain and bad pain.
Okay.
Bad pain can also be self-inflicted if you do a wrong movement, train too hard, and it can cause injury, even though it's self-inflicted. So there's another distinction. But it is bad pain because you strained a muscle or something like that. Or the good pain, aching muscles from a good workout. Muscles are tired at some point, or just from stretching the muscles over a longer period of time. That can be a kind of a good pain.
Okay, I just want to get a baseline appreciation of what we're talking about. So we've got, Mike says there's good pain and there's bad pain. Lachlan.
There's even another distinction that I would make, which is similar. But if I go and do a tough training session, especially now when I've not done one for a while, I would expect to feel Mike's good pain tomorrow. But if I train every day or race every day or even race all day in multiple events, there comes a point where it's a fatigue, but it is also painful. And it's happening while you're in the boat, or it's happening while you're exercising. And you have to deal with that very differently to how you deal with the pain that comes a day after a training session.
Okay.
Ability to sort of batter on, as it were, but without doing yourself any harm.
Okay. Candy, what do you think?
I think I've definitely learned a lot about my my experience of pain through my shoulder thing. I think we have to be familiar with how our body gets pain, if that makes sense. So I can now distinguish a bit better. I'm learning all the time anyway, but I can distinguish a bit better what pain is DOMS and what may be on the verge of something breaking. So for example, when my shoulder was hurting, I found out too late that it was a mild dislocation, and really I should have listened to the first hint of pain. But previously I had experiences where I would push through the pain and actually it was okay. It turned out to be me pushing through DOMS pain. And so kind of, I think it's something that we have to get used to the pattern about. I kind of agree with what Mike was saying about there being bad pain and good pain. But then I think within that, it's also that journey of learning about what that is for you.
Okay.
I've come to, as I'm rehabbing a bit more on my shoulder, what my osteo said in our last appointment was it seems like it's now turned into more of a psychological barrier. So whenever I feel pain, I would stop myself from moving because I don't want to break, because I truly believe that I will break because of, oh gosh, it was dislocated like 3 weeks ago or something. But actually that's a psychological pain rather than it actually about to break. So I now need to learn to push through that psychological pain.
Yeah.
It's just all fascinating. But yeah, it's very complicated. Is what I
Okay,
think
so
I've
there's
gotten from that.
when you've got a recent injury, say chronic injury, acute injury, then there's the concern about consequences, yeah, okay, or repercussions in terms of rehabbing, breaking down. Of course, that also applies to performance as well in some ways, about what pushing yourself too far, whether it's too far into injury or too far into breaking down and whatever. Okay, so let's hold that for a minute. But G, what do you think? Pain, the role of pain. I'm going to refine it down a little bit in a minute, but generally,
Okay, so
let's get my sandwich.
pain is a protective mechanism. When you're training, it happens because you are stretching, you have a tension in the muscles in your joints, so it happens. And that's a good pain because you have to go through it to build up your strength, your endurance, all these things that you need to work on your sports.
Right.
But also there is what Mike said, a bad pain, and obviously with a bad pain comes with the symptoms. So you'll know it's a bad pain when you see more physical symptoms like swelling, redness, and all the thing.
Right.
And that's obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I studied it and I know what it is. And what Candy is saying, if we think about it, it's more to do about the psychological side of it. How you think about the pain matters more than anything, obviously. But what Lachlan mentioned earlier is that when you're feeling fatigue, it goes in a cycle, isn't it? Because when you're fatiguing, you're gonna get more pain. And when you've got pain, you can't develop muscles to build it up into strength because the pain is the barrier. And this is why we always treat the pain first, if it's really a true pain. And that's why rest is important as well than overtraining. So that's my views, obviously.
Okay. Before I move on, Scott, what do you think? Is pain a necessary part of training?
I don't. Well, from my point of view, I think sometimes I label things as being painful when I don't think they actually are. But I think sometimes my mind tricks me into thinking I'm in pain. But if I think about all the times that I've been in pain in my life, and then sort of bring that across to sort of training the different types of pain. So a lot of it for me is just the buildup of lactic acid and the Krebs cycle. So when I'm training, I don't really think it's pain, to be honest. I think it's something else.
Okay, give me a better term then.
Exertion. Probably.
Exertion, okay.
Yeah.
Outside your comfort zone, progressive overload, these sort of things. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
painful sensation. Okay.
I don't think it's pain though, because it wouldn't really. So sort of, if you broke your leg, it'd stop you from doing something,
Yeah.
or if you didn't sprain something. But when I think you're actually training and you're training diligently, and with some gusto, but obviously within the correct parameters, it's not the same type of pain though. I think it's different pain receptors. You're linking it to different parts of your brain.
Right.
So
No,
even
you
though-
also linked it to something else there. This is what I'm basically. I'm. This is not one of those sessions where I'm going to say this is blah 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 blah. I want to bring it out of you. So you also made a link there regarding pain. You linked it to proper something or other. I'm not going to give you the words. You started, then you went off at a slightly different. Pain, of course, you'd have to something. You talked about lactic acid, Krebs
And
cycle.
the Krebs cycle, yeah.
So when you're in a boat and you're talking about training with gusto, enthusiasm, but so when the pain you were talking about then at that point. So you're in a boat, you're working hard. What is it linked to?
The exertion of it, man.
Exertion, right, or performance, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
So next question is pain. Okay, so we know that the negative parts of pain, you break your leg, you get run over by a bus, they can be painful events. Somebody hits you over the head with an axe, that's gonna be fairly painful. But I'm not really talking about that. What I'm talking about is pain can certainly be a trigger. And as G says, it's a trigger, it's a protective mechanism, but can pain or discomfort be a trigger to performance?
I
Yeah,
think
so.
yes. Oh, sorry. Go on, Scott.
No, I'm just saying I would say yes.
Okay. Now that was a closed question. So let me ask you an open question. How can pain or discomfort, are you happy with pain, or shall we call it discomfort? You know what I mean? It's not the break your leg pain, it's the push yourself, it's the lactic overload, or progressive overload, it's the lactic burn, that sort of pain. Can that be a trigger? Well, yes, but how can that be a trigger to performance, higher performance?
I think probably the more you experience it, the more you can sort of to a degree, you can lift your threshold to a degree based on your own biology.
Okay, okay. Any other thoughts?
I was
Mike,
gonna
is that
say-
the good pain or the bad pain? Depends on your perspective, I suppose.
Well, I was going to say, I think it comes down to perception again, and I think it probably partly comes down to experience of exercise in general,
Right.
and knowing the body and knowing when you've got more in the tank to empty, even though you're gasping for air. You know that last time you did a run and you had cramps and you managed to run through it because you managed to, perception will come in, learning will come in. I think that's where that will come in.
All right.
And
So
therefore,
if we put that into a paddle connotation or context, then I go out and do 500 meters in my O1, K1, dragon boat, whatever, and I'm gasping for air, yeah, and I think I'm going to break down. I can't paddle another stroke, but I survive it, and then I go and do it again, and then sooner or later I'm doing that 10 times in a row. So I know I'm going to survive. Yeah, it's hard. I think I'm busting my lungs. I'm not actually busting my lungs, but yeah, you think you're somewhere near your limit. Okay. So whatever your limit is, and Scott quite rightly says, depending on your athlete, depending on your performer, that'll be pitched or pegged at a different level. So how do you use pain to enhance your own performance? If it's a trigger, when can you use it? How can you use it as a trigger?
Well, I quite like to experience pain after I did my session, because if I'm not feeling it, I know I didn't push myself further.
Okay, so when you say
Well,
I don't feel, what do you mean? what do you feel? Because you'll feel something different to me. What do you
Yeah,
feel?
so I'll feel achy. I'll probably gonna have struggle doing my activities in the next 48 hours, but then I'll overcome it. Yeah, I'll probably moan for life for the rest of my colleagues and my family and say,
Okay.
I think I've overdone it. Help me climb up the stairs, all these things. But I always look forward to that, because I don't know. It could be like, I feel like I was lazy. I knew it because when I do O1s or whatever, and I'm like just not exerting or putting too much pressure, I don't feel like I did something rewarding on that session, because I didn't felt that I did, push my limit a little bit more. So to me, it's more like an indication that somehow I did my best. That's me. That's my personal view of it, obviously, because I recognize that it's just a general aches and, my function, I move my limbs and arms, I still cannot get up and move.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you're describing is exactly what I mean with good pain. After an exhausting session. That's the good pain. You feel it, you know it was good. But I think there are other things in regards to pain and overcoming pain. Can also, for example, especially on long distance run or long distance paddling, let's say the first 500 meters, all of a sudden you think, oh, I really can't do it. I have to go another, I don't know, 2.5K or something like that. And surprisingly, at some point, the pain disappears. That is within the exercise that you can actually overcome the pain, and it gets easier, and that is amazing. Or what you described after the exercise, this good pain, the aching muscles, you know you have worked hard, and then 2 days later you're fine. I think there is this pain that you can overcome within the exercise, within a long distance paddling or run or whatever.
Whether it's long distance or short sprint or whatever, let's just focus in on the pain you endure or are prepared to endure during the exercise. So Ian, when you're working at, I'm not going to say 100%, I'm going to get away from talking about that. I'm talking about 85% plus your maximal for 200 meters, 100%, 10 seconds, you're done. So I'm talking about the true effort output, something around the 90% mark, maybe 95, depends.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel? So what tells you that you are operating at that level?
Yeah, it's tricky because, as you say, it depends on lots of things. I think depends on how you feel mentally going into that. So that initial bit might feel really good, you might feel really bad. So that initial effort might feel better some occasions than some other occasions. But I think I don't know whether I feel pain as so. I obviously do feel pain, but I don't know whether that's the word I would use at that point. I think it's more about, as you said, that exertion type scenario, and I think maybe what your mind thinks is pain isn't pain, and it's training yourself to realize that pain is part of the process. That's so it's not that psychological thing that stops you doing it. I'll take it off a bit because it's going to be painful. I think as you said, a huge amount of that is in your mind. I think your body can put up with a lot more than you think it can, and I think it's training your mind to understand that you can train with pain. That's just
an analogy I've used in the past. I mean, I've got a Land Rover now, but I've had Land Rovers and Range Rovers over the years. You're driving on rough ground on a 4x4. You will always bottle out long before the vehicle will.
Mm.
Yeah, you can drive a Land Rover on that sort of it, and it's fine. Yeah, but you'll think, oh, blimey,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So your own capacity, mentally and physically, is far in excess, and people reckon we only use a fraction of our actual brain power.
Mm.
Now, we're not going to expand that in the next 40 minutes. I know we might do, but it's just exploring that link between pain or discomfort or the exertion of effort being a limiting factor and being an enabling factor.
Mm.
So having done a lot of sprinting and stuff and all the rest of it, was out in an OC6 last night, first session in the V6 OC6 for a long time, and I was surprised how many people firstly hadn't done anything at all for like months and months, which is crazy, and they wanted to do a moderate session, just 10k around the lake, four laps of the lake, and then they went out and had a beat up session and all got knackered.
Mm.
And it's just unintelligent use of pain. We were talking about paddling on the red line, not in the red mist. So they just carried on paddling like they did, like they hadn't been doing anything, and just got knackered and fell about and that sort of stuff. That's just ridiculous. That's just unintelligent paddling. Of course, I'm just there paddling. I'm not there to lecture anybody. Unintelligent use of pain. So what I'm talking about is how you intelligently use your ability to overcome your natural compulsion to stop. Because when you think about it, Bev talks about G talks about the limiting factor. It's a protective system. Your body, you're all human beings, and I love saying this to athletes, you are the laziest bunch of people I've ever met because you're human beings. Because 7 million years of human development has told you that If you don't have to do it, don't do it. You know, you're not being chased by this saber-toothed tiger, so why are you doing it? And this is what performance sport is. And what you read, whoever you read, pretty much, and I've read a few, performance athletes, they've got their own take on pain. But John O'Grady actually puts it the most succinctly I've ever heard it. I can't remember, maybe Ron was talking to him, Ron Williams, and I was there one day. He said to him, yeah, what? Because at that stage, John O, I think, was the fastest 01 paddler we've ever produced. You know, he's a sub-Olympic K1, K2 paddler, top-end paddler. And one of those off-the-cuff things, yeah, why are you so fast? Or something, some daft question like that. And John O said, honestly, I think I'm just prepared to put myself through more pain than the next person. But it wasn't unintelligent pain. It was a very calculated, specific sort of pain and discomfort that, to take Candy's point, it's measured, it's understood. He doesn't have to know the physiological names and the anatomical terms and stuff, but he knows how his own body works. It doesn't matter if you know it's a triceps or a bicep. You know what you know what you're trying to do. You know what enables you. You know what limits you. So you're getting to that red line. So I suppose now, I mean, I'm not as good a paddler as John O'Grady by a long way, but if I'm sprinting or gearing up or time trialing or whatever, if I want to be operating at a certain level, 90%, then I'm looking for a specific feeling. I'm looking for a specific feeling in my top arm, in my shoulder, in my hamstrings, in all sorts of things. And if I haven't got that sensation, I know I'm not on the pace. Mm-hmm. And you do it, and when you do it that often with heart rate monitors, I use heart rate monitors, but if I want to dial up level 4, I'm pretty much know where level 4 is. And if I check it every now and again, you know what I mean? So you do it sufficiently, but not too much. You're not training there every day. But what you're doing is you're going to the red line and you're pushing the red line, just pushing the needle. You're not into the red mist, and you know when you go into it. Like, if, you know, for example, if you start paddling at 100 strokes a minute, it'll be just crazy. You'll be head down, you'll forget all your technique, and you'll be just trying to get through. You'll be doing the rotations, but it won't be taking you anywhere. So that's red mist paddling. But the whole point is to go to your red line and push and push and push and get into your discomfort zone. And eventually you'll just push that. Eventually you'll push it a bit further. And that's how you increase. And this is what Scott is talking about in terms of progressive overload. Yeah.
Tim, can I just add something there as well?
Yeah.
I think very brief points. And I just remember back to when we were last on the water last March. Because I think when we're talking about exertion, pain, whatever you want to call it, for me, there was 2 different types. There was the individual pain that obviously, or exertion that I was feeling. But I think together, when we were in the boat, there was the group pain as well. And I think at a point where you think you'll be reaching your threshold, if I'm looking over, seeing Ian or Candy in front of me, your threshold increases because you see other people in pain. And I think so that's, you've got the individual feeling of pain, but then you've got the group pain as well, that everyone else is in the same place. And then, like, it was almost like a magical moment, is that because everyone else was suffering, because everyone else was trying and everyone else was in pain, it makes you want to exert yourself and be in more pain for longer because other people are in pain.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, yes, and that's team blending, isn't it? And when you get to that stage, yeah, I mean, we've said this before. Yeah, yes, you get GB shirt and wave a flag and that sort of stuff. That's the icing on the cake. Yeah, the cake is the boys and the girls in the boat, and the fact that you're pushing yourself beyond what you think your limit is, because, well, perhaps some of it is ego, some of it is you don't want to be seen to be letting the crew down. I mean, a very personal thing for me is, clearly I'm not going to make the difference between winning and losing a race, one person in the boat. But when I go into a race, that's what's in my mind. It's not in my mind about whether I'm going to let the side down. What's in my mind is right there, right now, it is completely down to me to win the race. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not doing something you're not doing. But you know what I mean? It's how I get myself into that particular racing zone. And it's a selfish thought. But I mean, what you've got to do is find something when you're digging in these sort of rooting around on these pain thresholds. You've got to find something that really does mean something to you. Now, when I first started all this, my son is now 22, but when he was 11, 12, 13, we took him out to Tampa at the World Championships. And because he was my son, he went out as the second drummer. You don't have second drummers. Anita was the main drummer. And he came back as being the primary drummer. And that's really a lot of the stuff I talk about, drummers, coxes now come from that. Because for me, everything that meant absolutely everything to me in the world, I didn't have to visualize it. It was on the front of the boat. And the sole job with me paddling in the boat was to project my son fast forward down the race course as fast as possible. Now, when it's as easy as that and it's in front of you, but you've got to be digging into something. And sometimes it's something you talk to people, and they go to very, very dark places because they're really summoning up demons and all sorts of stuff. And when you think about it, if you're trying to be aggressive as a precision point rather than a blunt instrument, it's sometimes easy to find something that really pees you off, or your ex-husband or your ex-wife or your ex-partner that really annoys you sufficient to, and you see what I mean? It's something that's really a personal thing, and it's worth thinking about, because when you get in the boat, this is Scott's point exactly, and really well put. Is your pain your own? No, it's not. It is for the whole of your life. But in the race boat, it's a shared experience. So you don't really have, I mean, this is I don't mean it in a nasty way, but you don't really have license during the race to have your own thoughts, because you belong to the team. We all belong to the team. And whoever's steering, they're steering. I'm not steering. I'm not paddle steering off the front. I'm not second guessing. I'm not sort of questioning it. And frankly, if we end up ramming the side, we'll ram the side. We can debrief it afterwards. But the point is, we train sufficiently that we put our trust in the helm, the steerer, to steer the boat. If they need a tactic on the front, draw or whatever, we do that. And if the drummer cox calls something, that's what we do. That's why we train in such a way that it's a repertoire of calls, and we know what they're going to say pretty much, not necessarily when they're going to say it, but they say it, we do it. And the best way to lose a race, as you'll know, is to start looking around, and then suddenly you've got 20 people racing 20 different races, and it's no longer, the fabric of the team has broken down. So if you're at what you think is your maximum, your optimum, and we need more, you just deliver it. It's for that 45 seconds or hopefully 1:59 or less, it's a non-negotiable point. You know what I mean? It's your time is not your own. And it doesn't belong to me as a coach, it doesn't belong to the steerer, it belongs to the team. It's you give the team your time to achieve your best. Yeah. So I'd say there's probably broad consensus about that. Occasionally people say to me, what? Because I say to people, for example, what are you looking at in the boat? And they say, I'm looking at the finish line. I say, why are you looking at the finish line for? He says, well, so I know how much effort to put in. I says, you what? I said, it doesn't matter if the finish line is 2K away, 10K away, or 2 meters away. That's not your call.
Yeah.
And I mean it in a smiley sort of way, but during a top level race, it's not your call to look at the finish line and think, well, I've still got 250 meters to go, so perhaps I can take it a bit easy and put a push in at the end. You see what I mean? So that being the case, that's the aspirational goal. It's not. It's actually the realism. How do you train for it? That's the question. How do you train to get to that situation? I've got some ideas, but I'm interested in your ideas. How do you bring a group of people to that sort of pitch?
The first thing is you have to experience it in training. It's no good if the first time that you get to that point physically is in a race. Right. So to paraphrase that, would you agree it's a military thing, as in training, so in war? Now, I know it's not a war, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't put it that way, but yeah. How would you put it? I'm not sure. I don't want to say that you. What I want to say is that you win in the training, right?
Yes.
Obviously, you have to apply it on the day, and you definitely don't ease up because you've already done the hard work in training. But if you win a race, it's not because you performed well on the day; it's because you trained well and you applied what you learned.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
And most of the medals I've won have been won on Liverpool docks, the Thames, Bray Lake, because these are the places where I train day in, day out, week in, week out. Absolutely. So, yes. But during that training, so I'm interested now in the link between pain in training and pain in competition. We sort of touched upon that. So what is there a difference there?
I'm going to say that I'm going to say not really, because you want to, if you know that at a certain point in the race it hurts, it's like you described, you're at that point in the race, so it should feel the same, right?
Right. But I'll give you another example. So I've got an ergo here, right? So I'll get on my ergo and I whatever distance I'm doing, I do a distance, and I'm saying I'm regularly doing, I would say 150, 500. So I'm doing that, and I get towards the last 50 meters, and I can make that 150 become a 141, because you're into flight, you're into the end of the race. Yeah. So that's me training by myself. If we had 5 or 6 ergos lined up and all the screens were linked up, so I could see what Ian's doing and I could see what Mike's doing, then that 141 can become a 135. Yeah, so the Scott's point, joining together, you can always get an extra performance out. But that, I think the output or the output and the result is different, but the pain you experience, I think you're right. I think that's the same there.
Because what I'm trying to say, Tim, is that it's when you're training, you shouldn't hold back saying, but I'm going to hold my, I'm going to keep a bit of strength back for the race, right? Mm. You've got to give everything in training, because that's how you improve your physical ability so that you can perform in the race, right? The people that get in the boat and say, I'm going to give 95% today because I'm training and I'm going to give 100% in the race, their 100% isn't the same as the people that already gave 100% in training. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to explain about the pain.
And that's the whole principle of progressive overload and the basic. Absolutely. If I go out and I lift 50 kilos, I bench press 50 kilos 10 times today, 10 times tomorrow, 10 times next week, 10 times in a year's time, I can bench press 50 kilos. So you've got to progress and regress and move that whole thing on. Yeah. So how often should you be on the red line when you're training?
%100% all the time.
All the time. Go on, Ian. No, this is.
I could run it 100% all the time. I mean, I'm not sure much if I did. I think
for me, all this raises the question. Also, sorry, Ian, did I interrupt you?
No, you're right. Mike, carry on.
Yeah. Also, Tim, what you said about looking at the finish line. For me, it is important to know what I have ahead if I do a sprint on 100 meter or 10,000.
Yeah. That
is important, and I need to somehow manage my strength. It doesn't make sense if I start for a 10K race like on 100 meter. It doesn't make sense. It is not productive.
Yeah, but you wouldn't do that. I mean,
no. But what I'm trying to say is also I don't know if you would consider that smart paddling, but you need to think, what do you have ahead? That also applies to the training. So, for example, if I know I have a time trial tomorrow, I know I will do certain exercises, but I won't do those exercises to 120% because I know I have a time trial tomorrow with those exercises. It wouldn't make sense to go beyond my limit on the day before.
Yeah.
And I must say, quite a bad experience also with dragon boat paddling in regards to that when I was still a newbie, when we were doing this tug of war.
Yeah.
everyone knows. I didn't know even what it was, but I was put in the front row of my team because I was able to shout very loud. And they didn't tell us how many runs we do. I thought it's only, yeah, we do it once, and after that we'll decide who's the winner. So I gave everything, but then they asked us for another try. And then we had to go again. And then I was injured.
Right.
Because I did not know what I have ahead of me. And so I think, let's say, it is good to overcome the point and it is important, but you also need to know, you need to be smart and to know what lies ahead of you.
Yes, I'll just qualify or explain better what I meant by that. In a top level race, what we don't want is, you need to train intelligently, obviously. You don't want to be on the red line all the time because you're going to get injured. And you need to build the base. People say 70% of your time should be tempo anyway. So if you're going to build a tall tower, you've got to build a foundation to it. So a lot of sprint training is tempo, high-end aerobic. And what a lot of people tend to do is they forget the aerobic side of things and keep going sprinting. You end up with a very narrow pinnacle. Whereas if you build the base, you end up with a nice, strong pyramid. And that's that. But what I was talking about in terms of looking at the finish line, clearly you've got to pace yourself. And if you're going to go and do the return this month, you can see it's going to be 250, 500, 750, 1,000, 1,000, 750, 500, 250. Yeah. And that's going to take 23 minutes. So you know what's to come. So you intelligently train. But in a race, what was the point I was making is what you don't want is somebody in the boat looking at the finish line. You've got to be looking at all sorts of things, making that decision, that unilateral decision that, it's a 500-meter race. So in order for me to be strong at the end, I'm going to conserve a little bit in the middle, and I'm going to start working at 250. So what I'm saying is, in a race at top, you train in such a way that on the day of the race, as people always say, then you can think what you want, but you can look at what you want. But what we want is a maximal, optimum performance all the way down. And if you're called upon to give more, then you give more. That's at the race situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, training is a little bit different, and with training you're pushing the red line. So that's where you are, and you're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. But you're not pushing it every day. You're pushing it, and then you build the base, and then you're pushing it, and then you build the base, and eventually the base gets higher, and you can push it a bit more, and it will stay. And if instead of starting there, it will start there. But that's just structured, layered, intelligent training. That's different. So I'm not saying you need to know where you're going clearly, but I'm just talking about just the particular race situation where we don't want 20 people deciding what level of effort or energy or they're going to put in, because it's never going to work. And that's why we train as a team. And that's Scott's point exactly. It's a great point that when you're working together and you have the trust and the confidence and the team spirit and the blending, you will perform. You'll perform more. But the point Scott was making as well was, yes, you'll perform, but you'll keep your technique and you'll keep your style, because I'm sure you've all seen people who do a technical session and it's great technical drills, and then they put it under pressure and it goes to rat shit. And their head down and their wheel spinning and they're no drive in the legs and this sort of thing. So there has to be a connection between the two, doesn't there? And that's the root of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this,
I was going to say to him, the key thing that both Scott and Lachlan said, you've got to have felt what 100% feels like, what your maximum effort is before you can know if, you've got to sense that in training before you know what you're doing in a boat, in a race situation. Because as Mike said, if you think you're going 80% in your own head, you're not necessarily going 80% because you've never felt what 100% feels like. So you can't take it easy in training, as Lachlan said again. You can't just go, well, I'll just go through the motions just because you know, it's training. You know, you need to feel what that feels like, or else. And as Scott said that time in the boat when we were doing the training at the last BNTS session, that was one of those times where I thought that was as much as I could ever give. And I think the first thing, and I was talking to Scott about it at the time, first thing you want to do is do it again. You know what I mean? You go, that felt so good. You know what I mean? You had such a buzz off that. As much as you thought you were empty, the first thought is, I want to go and do that again. I want to feel that again. It was a really positive thing. And as you said about that's sort of how you use pain to make yourself train better. And I think that was it for me. I felt finished, but I still wanted to go again.
I mean, I would say pain's not the right term. I love pain, right? I don't do drugs. I don't drink much. I don't drink anything. But my drug of choice is adrenaline. But in order to dial that in or expose that, I have to get myself into an uncomfortable. When I say uncomfortable, it's not really uncomfortable because I like it. You know, I'm up what I think is my maximal for that given day, and it's amazing that however you do it often enough, and the split times is like a second, half a second, and you get to the stage where near time trials where that was a bad run, and it's like half a second slower. But the psychology of it is really, really important and really key. Okay, let's park pain for a minute. Okay, I'm going to come back to it later on, but just hold that for a minute. Back of the stroke. Let's just spend a little bit of time talking about the back of the stroke. So what happens at the back of the stroke? What's going on at the back of the stroke? You've all been coached by somebody. So you got the catch.
Yeah.
You got the PowerPoint. And at some stage, somewhere, the paddle comes out the back somewhere and ends up at the front again. And when it's out the water, that's called the air work. That's your twist, lean, catch, and blah, and all that sort of stuff, and paddle positions and top hands and that sort of stuff. But that business at the back end. Firstly, what is the back end? Where is it? It's at the back. Yeah, I know that bit. Yeah, what is the back?
Isn't it? It's about getting the paddle out of the water cleanly and efficiently without pushing the boat down, and getting back into the setup to come forward ready for the next stroke, basically. So it's the part of the stroke, as you said, that doesn't propel the boat forward.
Right. Okay, that's a key point, actually. So if it doesn't propel the boat forward, should we worry about it at all?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't say I agreed with you. I said it's a good point. I think there's a lot you can use on the back of the stroke that is underused.
Okay, I know some people have ideas about flicking the paddle out and all stuff like that, but to me, you get the paddle out of the water and you reset, and you get ready for the next stroke. But clearly, bringing the paddle forward in the air does not propel the boat, and there is a possibility of slowing the boat down. And I myself have been guilty of this. If you leave the paddle in too much or push down as you pull it out. Sorry, lift up as you pull it out, things like that. So the goal is to do that as cleanly and efficiently as possible.
Okay, next time you're in a single boat, 01, preferably in still air, no wind, just move your body forwards. Yeah, very slow back, move, and you might find the boat goes forwards. There is some propulsion in moving your body forwards. You could argue there's wind resistance, but we've done it enough times that if everybody did it together in a 2-ton boat, if you could work together and you could blend your team and you're all in time and all in phase and you all move forward together, then there is some propulsion. It might be 0.25 of a kph, but if you could get 0.25 of a kph out of all in a synchronized way moving forward, is it worth exploring? Yeah. Because I've been in races. top level where it's won and lost in not hundredths of a second, thousandths of a second. But that's not what that's air work. I'm not that there is some propulsion in the air work if you work together. If you're out of time and out of sync, it will slow you down. But the original question, just getting back a little bit, where is the back of the stroke?
So assuming it's from the PowerPoint to the point as Lathan said, before you pull your paddle out of the water.
Okay, fine. So where give you some, define that a bit more. So when you pull it out the water, where is it? Where is that point?
You don't pull behind your hip.
Yeah, hip level.
Right. So what's level with your hip?
The outer hand.
The bottom hand.
Not the blade. Yeah.
Right. So the
Yeah,
blade.
the bottom arm, yeah.
So positive. Let's call that a positive impulse. Everything that's driving the boat forward. And so at the back, at the hip, when your bottom hand is level with your hip, not behind, the blade will be tracking negative at that point. And because you can't stop the boat, lift it out and move it forward, there is going to be some little negative impulse at the back. That's unavoidable. When you see people really, grabbing water and hacking water out the back, then that's a massive impulse. Let me show you a little graph. I'll just share a screen. Oop. There we go. I'll show you this one first. Tell me if you can see it. This sort of worked before. Oh, it's not coming up yet. Hang on. Not responding. That's great. That's great. Cancel that for a minute. See if I can get another one. Hang on. Talk amongst yourselves. Right, let's try that one.
Something's happening.
Can you see that?
Not yet, but something is happening. View options.
I can see that you're sharing. Right?
There you go.
I can see.
Yeah. There it is. There
Right,
it is.
Okay.
That's very
Can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, so this is, it just happens to be 28 at the front. This is me, right-hand side. It says Tim Swift, but it's Tim Smith. This is my paddle stroke a couple of years ago in Florida. If you have a look at where the cursor is, the 0 line, so it's measured in kilos, not newtons. So that's the 0 line there, okay? One little graduation above. So everything above that line there is positive. Everything above that, below that line, is negative. And you see at the back end of the stroke, there's a little bit of a negative impulse there. That's where the blade is just lifting out of the water, yeah? It's about 1 or 2 kilos in my case. If you get somebody who's ripping out the back, that negative impulse will be down here. And you do get some people who are putting 20 kilos on the front and taking 10 or 12 kilos off at the back. Okay, and you think, well, this thing is supposed to be asymmetrical. It's not supposed to be put on the front, take off at the back. That's not the way it works. So, obviously, this is the catch here, the forward edge. This bit here, the apex, is the power point. There's your 90-degree point. And then most people who paddle, that will tail off, and they might get a bit of slippage in the blade, and it will go straight off down like the brown line. What I'm looking for is this extra kick off the back. And where you see the graph starting to level out, that is mid-thigh. So this here, and it's only a fraction of a second, it's only about 0.2 or 0.3 of a second, that's an extra kick you can get off the back. Now, if I give you a better view of that, whoop, hang on. Hang on, oh, here we go. I'm trying to give it a better, let's try this one. Just give it a couple of seconds to warm up. For some reason, it's very slow. Right, here we go. Can you see that? So you've got a black line, an orange line, and a green line, yeah?
Not yet. Oh yeah, there it is.
Right.
There it is.
So with me, just for what it's worth, I'm slightly stronger on the right on the peak, slightly less strong on the kick off the back, and on the left, I'm less strong on the peak and I'm stronger on, so it evens out, yeah? But as you can see here, you can see the bit that's the negative impulse, and this is, in this case, it's pretty much 60 strokes a minute because it's going from 15.3, that's seconds, to 16.3. That's one stroke length. Okay. So that's the impulse. And most people you see paddle, that will tail off to there. So some of it at the back is diminishing return, it's dead space. What I'm trying to get people to do is paddle so they have a very purposeful kick off the back. And for me, it's 5 kilos there. So it's a fifth of my power there, and it's a little bit more on the bottom. So if you can paddle in such a way that you're utilizing the back of the stroke without going too long, do you think that's worth training for?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, on some graphs, that can be up to 1/3 of your power. So here, if you look at this one, that impulse on the back is about 8 kilos there, and the top is about 24, 25, that sort of thing. So you could develop, if you're anything like me, you could develop another 1/3 of your body power just on the back of the stroke. Yeah. So just that's the theory of it. So how do you do this? It's something I'd like to try in your single boats or dragon boats. It's called light and heavy. You may have come across it before, also known as light and bitter if you're of a certain age, but light and heavy. So the front of the stroke is the catch point to mid-thigh. So if you're an outrigger paddler, that will be where you're extracting in an outrigger. The back of the stroke is mid-thigh to hip. Okay, this is track of the bottom hand. So I don't talk about what's happening on the back, how I extract. I just talk about building a wall. So what you catch, you keep. Whatever impulse you're putting in, force you're introducing at the front, you keep that force all the way through. You avoid the slippage, and I didn't really highlight this. On that line, the yellow or the orange and the green line were fairly straight, weren't they? So that means one of those, I think the yellow line is roll. That's or sort of a, so that's roll or slippage. Okay, so you're trying to go from positive through neutral, and it's going to go negative at the end. Okay, so the way you do it is you split it up. You've got the front of the stroke, the back of the stroke. So you paddle light, and when I say light, call it 70% and 90%, light and heavy. So the first 20 strokes you do light, nice aerobic. Make sure you've got the, you catch the water on the front, keep it all the way through. A nice efficient stroke. The next one you do is light, heavy. So the front of the stroke is 70%, and then you do a big push off the back. Don't rip out the back. The back of the stroke is still the hip. Just that last third of the stroke, really just engaging. It's a second peak or a second catch, really, but you can only achieve it if you've got the pressure to start with. You can't do hard on the front and then let it tail off and then bring it up again. Okay, so you're really just levering off the back. Okay, so that's the second one. Light or 70%, light heavy 70, 90 plus. Then you do heavy light, and then you do heavy. Okay, now what tends to happen is most paddlers you'll see in the world paddle heavy lights. Yeah, and that little back of the stroke is actually, as it's tailing off, especially if they let the blade slip, it's a little bit of a rest. So what I'm saying to you now is we're going to start paddling, so we haven't got that rest. We're going to take out that little portion of rest. So it's heavy all the way. Yeah? Do you think you can do that?
Yeah.
But the thing to do is you can't just, if I just said to go paddle heavy, you need to understand what that means. And what that means is doing the light heavy. And in a dragon boat, I think we probably got into this a little bit last year, a year ago, I can't remember, where that impulse on the back, you do feel the difference. So before you start using it in the heavy side of things, you've got to understand the difference, and you've got to be disciplined enough to know where it starts and certainly where it stops. Because if you overdo it on the back, then you've got this big negative impulse and you're slowing the boat down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to round this off, I'm going to talk more about this, but if you're going heavy on the front, heavy on the back, and you're going 2 in the water, 1 in the air, so you've only at a 60 stroke a minute, 1 stroke a second, you've only got a recovery and a setup of 1/3 of a second. There's very little room for recovery or taking it easy. Yeah. So if you're going heavy, heavy, give me another term for that sort of paddling. Let me suggest painful. That's what it is. I want you to paddle painfully, but I want you to do it in an intelligent way, knowing what you're doing. What I don't want you to do is go and break yourself. Yeah. Paddle in such a way that you understand where the front of the stroke starts and stops. You understand where the back of the stroke starts and stops, and working in amongst all the other stuff you're doing, work in those different phases so you know what extra push you can find on the back of the stroke. Now, you're not going to do this every time because you'll come off knackered. I can't sustain this for 2K. I can just about sustain it for a K. So for a 2K race, you'll need different elements, if you know what I mean. But it really is. Candy, go.
Just wanted to ask about the back of the stroke. Would and just trying to relate it to the experience I've had, would the water be traveling faster or slightly faster towards the back of the stroke? I'm just thinking how sometimes it feels quite loose as I'm coming out.
Right. Well, okay. What a lot of people talk about, especially in outrigger paddling, is accelerating the blade through the water. It's a bit of a misnomer because if you think about it, if you accelerated the boat through the water, or the paddle through the water, every time you did it, there'll be no end to your top speed. And you'd be traveling at light speed in a short space of time. What they actually mean is you're trying to accelerate the blade through the water as a bit of a trick on the mind to keep the pressure or keep the force going through the blade. Yeah. That's why people use that term. The boat just doesn't keep accelerating. It accelerates up to your optimum, and then if you leave it to its own devices, it will eventually start slowing down. So you're maintaining that pressure to maintain that speed.
But I had the same thought that let's say that I would think, okay, how do I achieve this? You call it heavy. So I would just try, okay, after the catch, try to speed up the pull. And that is the acceleration. Instead of, hard in the beginning and then dropping down the speed, I try to go faster towards the end.
Yeah, the light and heavy is a drill. The only reason for the drill, splitting up the stroke into front and back, is so you understand what's going on at the back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then when you're doing heavy, you still are pulling off the back, but you just know where it starts. And that's the light and heavy. The point of the drill is to understand the discipline of where the back starts, what you're doing at the back, and more importantly, as importantly, where it finishes. So the idea is you do it together, and it becomes not second nature, but more familiar or a default. The problem,
but the acceleration would work within one stroke, wouldn't it? You try to accelerate within one stroke.
Yeah, but we always talk about it. I've never ever seen anybody do it. What they do is your body will tell you to take it easy. So the way they manage to accelerate the stroke is they just come out, they just let the blade ride out. And at the back of the stroke, you may have a half or 2/3 of the blade buried. So what you're really aiming at, we talk about, it's a bit like kick and leg drive. We talk about accelerating. What you're really actually trying to do is set up on the front, the strongest part of the stroke, and maintain the pressure all the way through. But if in your mind, you're trying to accelerate, if you're trying to accelerate it, you will achieve the same thing. That's essentially what it is. But I've never actually seen anybody paddle in such a way they do actually accelerate the blade. once the boat's up to optimum. Because like I say, it just keep accelerating, it just doesn't do that.
But isn't that in connection with what you mentioned with bouncing off the wall of water or something like that?
Right.
Isn't that, let's say,
you don't want to bounce the boat?
Similar thing.
But what you're doing is building a wall, and at the back, you're springing off the wall.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Pushing off a wall. Now, obviously, I know you can't. In physics, you can't compress a liquid. I know that, but you're a lot of kayaking is about walls of, notional walls of water that you're pushing against. So in a kayak, if I'm driving down with this arm, I'm with this hip, the opposite hip, I'm pushing against the boat. So I'm getting that connectivity between my right hip and my left paddle. Now you can't do that in a dragon boat because obviously it's a bigger boat. But you're still trying to find points of connectivity. So with dragon boating, the back of the stroke, you're building and then you're springing off the back. And once again, it comes down to what's in your mind. But if you haven't got the pressure on the paddle at the back, you can't spring off anything. And then people start talking about, breaking the arm, breaking the wrist. What do you do at the back? Well, I spring off the back, I get it up, push it forward, and I go again. Yeah? No? Lachlan, looking quizzical. I like people looking quizzical. It normally means they're thinking. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I think when Coach Bangs went to the last international, whenever it was, he sort of came back with his tail up a little bit and was sort of saying exactly what you just said. So he was referring to it as sort of a spring stroke, and he tried it for a little bit, but it's sort of he's waned off the idea, obviously, because we've been locked down and stuff. But essentially, just mirroring what you just said, Tim, that there was more to get out at the back, which would keep the boat speed where it should be, as opposed to waiting for the next catch.
Well, we actually,
so you would have less to recover, because the boat wasn't slowing down as quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we introduced it. I mean, I was coaching the Prems with Dave. We introduced it in 2017. That's where it came from. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
That initial idea, just working as much of the stroke as you can, but not going too far. So the bottom line with it is, I'm hoping you're thinking, well, does that really work? What I'm hoping you can do is go into your single boats or your dragon boats and try it. Try and be disciplined to know how to work the front and the back of the stroke, and then come back and tell me what you think about it. I mean, it works for me. It works for me, but it may not work for you. But
it's a very tiring stroke.
Pardon?
It's a very tiring stroke.
Absolutely, it's a painful stroke. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no let up in it, because when you're springing off the back, it's not like punching forward, but there's absolutely no let up in it at all, and that's why it's really not really. It's really a 200 meter and a 500 meter, maybe 1,000 meter tactic. I don't think you can maintain it for 2,000 meters.
I think it links well with your pain.
Absolutely, well done for noticing it. That's exactly what that's it. This is a situation where you're going into a painful or a discomfort zone. But the whole point about pain that I didn't mention is it's not just pain, is it? It's got to be pain with a purpose. If somebody asks you to do something ridiculous, and I mean, I've mentioned this before, but I'll just finish off with this. So Scott's sitting to my right. So if I've done this before, if I set a little fire here, so I say to Scott, can you reach across and put your hand in the fire, please? No, come on, just reach across, put your hand in the fire. Go on. What's up with you? Just reach across, put your hand in the fire. Why don't you want to do that?
Historically, history tells me it'll be a bad thing. Like,
yeah, there's no benefit, is there? There's pain with no benefit. But, and we've mentioned this before, if outside your window there a car crashed and a car hit a tree and burst into flames, and there's a couple of kids in the back screaming because they're burning to death, you're going to go and endure a significant or substantial amount of pain to rescue them, aren't you? you still get burned, but one is pain with no purpose, one is pain with a purpose. So the moral of that cautionary tale is no pain, no gain, forget it. Pain is only, pain is only weakness leaving the body, forget that. It's all about pain with a purpose. If there's a purpose, if there's sufficient purpose, then you will achieve and you will endure a huge amount of pain. And people say in life, not just coaching, that if the reason is not big enough, then the excuse will be. And that's true of anything, isn't it? It's not just coaching or performance. So that's where we're going. So we're gonna start taking into some painful areas. But the important thing for me is when you go in there, you've got to know why you're going there, and it's not just some bloke with some harebrained idea. And the point of working the back of the stroke is, yes, it gives you no let up, but you could produce another 30%, for me, 33% of your body power on the back of the stroke, which otherwise would be dead space or a diminishing power output. Yeah, that's it. That's all. Give it a go. Give it a go when you're in your single boats. Give it a go when you're in dragon boats. Do a sneaky push off the back. Even when Dave Bangs isn't looking, he won't mind. And if he does, tell him I asked you to do it. I'm sure he'll love it. Okay.
It's dark, you can't see it.
But you see what I mean? You'll see just by doing that, even when you're paddling normally, just working the back, you can feel quite strong. It's a bit like the old swan stroke. You can actually feel a bit of core engagement there. And if you feel good about it, it makes you work a bit harder. And that's the point you made to me. Anyway, that's enough. I've overrun a little bit by a couple of minutes. So enough from me. G, just to round off. G, any points?
Yes, the hard or the spring.
Heavy.
Heavy. And the spring action is something that I'm working with anyway with Dave, because we did some sort of like experiment time trial with the spring action at the back with hard. What is it? Hard is it? No, heavy. And the heavy obviously gives better results. However, it's very tiring. So then the focus then is try and breathe, because when it becomes heavy, I forget to breathe. So it's all linked about the breathing as well.
That's the best way to go anaerobic. Don't breathe at all. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was told to breathe. And every now and again I get shouted by Scott to tell me to breathe because I don't breathe.
Okay. That's good advice. I'll take that advice. Scott, any points?
Well, no, coach, I've made all mine.
Okay, mate. Fantastic. Candy.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. Just wanted to wish Lachlan good luck with your move next week.
Thank you.
And Ian.
Yeah, no, I think, as you say, it's good to be back to paddling, and there's some ideas to start thinking about getting back to thinking about your stroke again, rather than just, actually doing it rather than thinking about it.
Yeah. Thinking person sport. Got to think every stroke, every part of every stroke. Absolutely. Mike.
How was it called? Bray Lake. Monday, what time?
Right, I will put out I would say probably 10 o'clock. But what I'll do is I'll put out an email tonight and we'll see who's interested. The only thing you've got to do if you're going to Bray Lake is you've got to go onto their website and register. It's free just for track and trace. But I'll give you a link to all that sort of stuff. That's very simple. Yeah.
Yeah, and apart from that, I'll try to get on the water as much as possible at the moment.
Good stuff. Fantastic. Thank you. And Lachlan, I'll put you in contact with Nikki in Dubai so you can sort of.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, so I'll be there. I'll be there on Tuesday, but probably not in time. Probably not in time to paddle.
Shame on you. Right, okay.
Well, I imagine they paddle early morning, right? Because it's pretty hot in the day.
4:30, I think, actually, PM.
In the afternoon.
Yeah, I'll link you up anyway, and then whatever.
Yeah. It might work. Anyway, I'm there for 3 weeks, so I'm sure I can figure something out. So that'd be awesome.
Brilliant. Okay.
And, I'll also take the opportunity to dial in because I'm going to have some quarantine when I get to Hong Kong. So I'll be dialing in for a few fitness things and stuff to
Okay, and I'll put you in contact with Lee and Ness as well in Hong Kong. So that's fine. So no worries.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And they're doing light and heavy in Dubai as well. So you'll be well received.
Okay. Well, it's been a while since I've done any paddling.
Okay, no worries. Okay, fantastic, brilliant. Well done, mate.
Thanks a lot. Nice to see you all.
Bevlin, any points? No, probably still working. And Angie, any points?
No, it's all good. Thanks. Good to be back on the water.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Oh, you've been out with Seclo?
Yeah, last night.
Oh, good. Okay. How many did they get out? They get a good. They take in 14 or 10 the boat.
Well, it should have been 10, but we went 11 last night.
Okay, fine, whatever. Okay,
So, yeah.
brilliant.
11.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Well,